Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're joining us from. It is 3 p.m. here in the UK and 10 a.m. Eastern, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Today is, of course, Wednesday, which means in a few moments we'll be meeting today's special guest, Richard Starnes of Capgemini, their Chief Security Strategist. But first, a quick recap on yesterday's show, where we were fortunate enough to be joined by Mark Oakton, who is Director and CISO of InfoSec Partners. Now, he spoke to us about critical national infrastructure security, and we also strayed into talking about the potential vulnerabilities of super yachts too. Now, that's not strictly speaking CNI or critical national infrastructure, but if the navigation system were to be compromised on one of those yachts whilst at sea, it would be pretty critical to somebody, I'm sure you'll agree. So whilst this week is a short week, we still have lots to cram in. Tomorrow, of course, we are talking to Michael Osterman, founder of Osterman Research, who will talk to us about some of the government-focused insights they've been conducting. And on Friday, we'll also be joined by award-winning journalist Tom Field, who you may recognise from some of the video interviews and roundtable discussions that he's conducted at his time with ISMG, or Information Security Media Group. We'll be getting his take on the current state of play, and of course we'll be asking him some very important questions as we celebrate, virtually at least, National Cheese Ball Day, so don't miss that. As ever, a very quick intro from me. My name's Stuart Reed and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. As you may be familiar, Nominet is responsible for managing the .uk domain. We've been doing that for over 23 years now and have something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. Now, in addition, and building on our experience of domains and DNS, or domain name system, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks. And this includes providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. Now, at Nominet, ensuring people are able to be connected, included, and secure is at the heart of what we do. These highly unusual times that we're all experiencing together right now has meant that physical events, socials, and face-to-face meetings are all being halted. So we thought we would bring you a webcast that we hope in some small way helps to bridge and reconnect people, albeit virtually, that are either within or have an interest in cybersecurity, as arguably right now, more than ever before, it's essential that we're united as a cybersecurity community. Now, we're keeping things here at 0 Days Live pretty straightforward. We want to create a community that allows us to hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, and also share some thoughts on best practice. And of course, interject some good humour too. But most importantly, as ever, we can't do it by ourselves. We do need you. And so during today's show, or any of the other live shows that you join, you'll notice on the console on your screen the ability to ask questions or provide a comment at any time. So please do use it. Any questions you have today, please ask us and we'll read them out during today's webcast. Now, as our growing number of regulars to the show will know by now, we're keeping it all very authentic here. And whilst we cover many important subjects as part of the live shows and those that are on demand, we don't take ourselves too seriously at all. We run for about 30 minutes or so each day, but there are no hard and fast rules here. But of course, we are live, so anything could and probably will and has already happened. And when it does, we hope you'll agree it's just part of the rich tapestry of the show we're providing. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're not just live, we're also here for your convenience on demand too. Each and every show can be found at nominetcyber.com/0 Days Live, which is the same page you signed up from, so it couldn't be easier. And a very quick apology for yesterday. One eagle-eyed viewer of the show yesterday did point out to me afterwards that I didn't say the / after Nominet Cyber yesterday. So today I've corrected that. Hopefully it is as easy as can be to find us on demand now. Now, as with every show, we are joined by a great team, both here in the virtual studio and studios of 0 Days Live, but also behind the scenes as well. And we're lucky enough to be joined by special guests each and every day. But of course, as I said before, we can't do it without you. Thank you so much for joining us here at 0 Days Live. Each day we do welcome new people to our growing virtual community, and we really do appreciate you making the time for us. Last week, you may recall, we wanted to know from you and from what our guests that were in the studio, how they're taking their tea. This week's big question for those that tuned in yesterday is, what are you missing from the office? For me, yesterday, it was quite simply sticky notes. That was until one of our show regulars, Gary Foote of Has F1, pointed out that I can actually use a virtual equivalent. So thank you very much for that, Gary. It's already changing my life. So today, I need another thing that I'm missing most from the office. And quite simply, although thankfully you can't really see this, the thing I'm missing the most is clear desk policy. Without the same level of discipline here at home, it's all getting a little bit untidy on my desk right here. Now, at this point, I would usually turn to Steve, but as he continues to build his celebrity status elsewhere, he's unable to join us today, but fear not, he will return tomorrow. So instead, I'm going to go straight to Kerry. Hi there, Kerry. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Jolly good. Struggling a little bit with some of the audio there, so if you're able to get a little bit closer to the mic, that would be great. Whilst you tell us, what are you missing most from the office?
So yesterday I was missing the chicken and bacon sandwich from the fridge, but now my stomach is sorted out. I'm actually missing spontaneous collaboration. So that is not about, you know, our meetings and our getting together as a group and talking things through, everything that's booked in and quite, you know, we can do virtually. It's planned, and we're doing that really well virtually over WebEx and all the tools that we have available. But it's that spontaneous, I've got an issue or I need to talk to somebody, and being able to kind of spark up that lively debate in the office. That's what I'm missing today.
Yeah, and of course we're trying to plug those gaps as part of this show and general collaboration as well. But absolutely, you know, face to face is just not the same as the virtual stuff. So we'd also like to hear what you guys tuning in to us today are also missing from your office life or office environment. Please do, as Kerry indicates there, tap those into your console, into the questions or comments box, and Kerry will read them out during the show. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, today we are lucky enough to be joined by Richard Starnes. Before we meet him, here's a quick video from when we caught up with him as part of our Security Begins Here series a few weeks ago. So take a quick look at this.
Cloud security is not this magical, we go to the cloud, we're now secure. It doesn't work that way. You're not looking at stopping breaches 100%. It's simply not possible. What you're doing is you're looking at reducing the frequency and the severity of those breaches. There's a great deal of pressure, and CISOs, they simply have to learn how best they deal with it themselves.
Great. Well, I am very pleased to welcome to our virtual studio here, Richard Starnes. Hi there, Richard. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Yeah, very well. It's a nice, sunny, pleasant day here today, so we can't ask for more than that. Now, as you may have tuned into our show before, and as you would have undoubtedly heard in the intro there, we're asking some very, very important questions today. First things first, what are you missing most from the office environment?
I know it's going to sound a little bit corny, but I miss working with people face to face. I miss my work colleagues and working with our clients. Some of the best solutions and the best ideas and the best catches in security come from drive-by conversations in the water cooler. Kind of flipping your question a little bit, the thing that I have enjoyed the most about working from home and has been super beneficial for me personally is we have a 4.5-month-old black lab, and she quite likes her lunchtime walks.
Absolutely.
So that's the upside.
So you're starting to get that work-life balance at least. So that's something to be said for it. So thank you very much for that, Richard. Now, getting to the video there, I can't help but notice that in your video you say something that's really quite interesting, and I'd like to pick up on it if I may. You say that security is not a destination; it's a journey. Can you talk through what that really means, and what are organisations doing about it? Are they making some big mistakes?
Well, in the modern corporate world, we're always chasing the next quarter, and this has an impact on our long-term strategic thinking. Yes, much of security is technology and technology-based, and technology has its place, but it's designed and executed by humans. So we have to set baselines and projects where we want to see our people 2 to 5 years from now, as well as our technology. The corporate culture and human behavior have as much of an effect on security as technology itself. Um,
Well, so if I pick you up on a point there in terms of the journey itself, so are there kind of key milestones throughout this journey that people should really strive towards? What are the things that organizations or people that are planning in terms of the security efforts within their organizations, but what are those milestones that they should really be taking note of?
Well, every company is different. Their security needs are different. The risk tolerance is different. The key is to have a vision and to translate that vision into a plan with milestones appropriate for your company. The very earliest part of my working life was working at Radio Shack as a sales associate. And amongst learning about the product knowledge and those things, that you also had to take some sales classes as well. And one of the key points that I took away from that first sales class, and it's stayed with me to this day, is in order to hit a target, you have to make a target. So you have to set smart objectives. I'm sure we've all heard the term SMART objectives: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And if you don't have all 5 of those bullet points, you don't actually have an objective. So setting those and working through those and constantly doing course corrections is how you deal with your milestones. And companies that don't have that level of discipline, they don't look at what their maturity is in risk, what their maturity is in security, and measure themselves against that, then they're just missing the boat.
And that's an interesting point as well, because we talk a lot about security and risk, and sometimes we talk about those interchangeably, and maybe we shouldn't. So in terms of splitting those two things out, what do you think is more important to look at, and why? Is it the security piece, or is it the risk associated?
I think the terminology and lexicon of cybersecurity throughout its history is kind of interesting. You go back many years ago, it was information assurance, then it was cyber, then it was security, then it was cybersecurity, and it keeps on different iterations as we get better and more mature in our thinking. To me, and everybody's definitions are slightly different, security goes back to the old CIA triangle: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that was looked at, and those concepts were developed mainly in the US military. And then those were adapted to the private sector. Now, I think the disservice when we visually represented CIA was it was always an equilateral triangle. And your confidentiality, integrity, and availability needs are not an equilateral triangle. In fact, they're almost never that. But that was kind of how we got there. And risk is taking it that step further and looking at from threats, vulnerabilities, and impact. To our specific estate, not to a generalized information security world. And that is where we're coming from a risk standpoint. And we need to expand further into risk maturity and risk management. And I think security has had its day as a concept, and now we're going into the risk management as an overarching concept.
And in terms of the video that we saw a few moments ago, you also mentioned that we may be secure or we may be understanding our risks more effectively today, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be secure tomorrow. Do you think that's kind of a or a common misconception that organizations have, that they've got the baselines, they've got the foundations in today, and therefore they're well set up for the future and perhaps don't need to worry about it as much?
Well, I think a lot of companies look at frameworks like ISO 27001 or NIST or NIS or any of the, literally dozens or hundreds that you could name. And they think, well, we reach this and achieve this standard, then we're secure. The battlefield is strewn with the bodies of companies that were meeting that standard, but still got breached. That is a minimum baseline to reach. It is not the pinnacle of security. That's the 80, not the 100%. So we've got to look at it from that standpoint. And the reason that I had the concept of we're secure today, that doesn't mean we're secure tomorrow, comes from the idea of cryptography. The reason that encryption works is because you can't solve large factorization of large numbers very, very quickly. If somebody develops a way of factorizing prime numbers in a fast manner, then cryptography runs away. So you're secure one day, you're not secure the next. And it's the same with cybersecurity as a whole.
Okay, well, thank you, Rich. I mean, it's interesting and thought-provoking to kind of make sure that we're getting those that risk management aspect and that security posture right now, but also needing to think a little bit more into the future of how we continue on that journey, as you say, rather than considering it as a destination in its own right. I know that there's some questions coming in from our audience. So, Kerry, what have we got?
Yes, thank you. We've got quite a few. And so the first question is actually going to be from me, if that's okay. So I was just curious, where you were talking about sort of the use of frameworks within a security strategy, are there any particular frameworks that align more to kind of pulling together that long-term strategy? Are there any that you would recommend?
I wouldn't recommend any particular strategy as being better from a longevity standpoint. You have frameworks that are very venerable, like NIST and ISO 27001, which originally started off life as, I'm sure you know, as a British standard, BS 7799, low these, 20, 25 years. And that standard has stood the test of time because it has changed with the environment. Like I said, one particular standard is not going to be very good or very particular to longevity, but ISO 27001 tends to be the framework that most people use and then do a differential between that framework and whatever other framework they're working to. So in other words, they'll do ISO 27001, and then if they need to do an NIS framework or need to do another framework, they will just do a differential between the framework, that framework and ISO 27001, and then work the controls that are left over.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So we have a question in from Sydney. What do you think the biggest threat, cyber threat, will be in 2020?
Well, COVID. Not COVID itself, obviously, but the effects of COVID, and I don't say that lightly. We have seen in a lot of countries across the globe, small companies to medium-sized companies that were not ready for having the bulk of their workforce working from home. So they've had to cobble together collaboration tools and infrastructure on the fly. There have been large reports of PC World, of Best Buys in the US. These companies are literally picked clean of laptops because that people didn't have work from home capabilities, so they just went out and bought laptops, and they're using whatever work from home collaboration tools they can get their hands on. There's no vetting of these tools. There's no vetting of the laptops. There's no, it's just the Wild West. And this particular unfortunate virus has put a lot of risk into the field.
So when you're thinking about long-term strategy, which obviously is a bit further out, how can you plan for external factors like COVID?
Well, we've had these types of issues come up before, and we learn from each iteration of that. If you take a look at 1980, go back to 1985, Kobe, Japan suffered a major earthquake. Now, the problem with Kobe, Japan suffering a major earthquake at that time was about 25% of the world's memory chips were manufactured in Kobe. Mm-hmm. So this caused a worldwide increase in the cost and availability of memory chips. I remember as a systems administrator, we were literally locking our CPUs and our memory chips that were not in the new systems yet. We were locking them in safes because people were carting them off. And this taught us BCPDR problems in our supply chains. And you have supply chain lessons that keep getting learned and relearned. To a certain extent, BCPDR is lessons we keep having to relearn. So my question about the longevity of this is this going to cause, is COVID going to cause a root seed change in technology thinking, and BCPDR thinking, and is it going to, are people going to remember this 3 years from now or 5 years from now? Are we going to be talking about this again in 20 years when we have the next strain of COVID?
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. We've got a question in here from Dave, which says, within the security team, the firefighting on a daily basis is so high. Do you think that the board understand that when it comes to what they want to see in terms of strategy?
What the board want to see, or really more properly what they don't want to see, is their company in the papers due to breaches. And that's really the crux of the issue right there. These things have a negative impact on the company's bottom line, on the company's share price. So that is their primary overall concern. And a lot of companies are starting to bring in risk committees to help address that from a board level, to keep the pulse on what the risk appetite for the company is from a cyber standpoint, as well as from a traditional business risk standpoint.
And are those internal committees, or would they have external experts on those as well?
Usually they will have an internal committee, and they will bring in expertise as required, or sometimes they will have somebody on there on a permanent basis.
Brilliant, that's interesting, thank you. And then finally, from Michael, what do you think the types of threats industry, do you think that the type of threats the industry is facing are worsening? If so, how and why?
I don't know that they're worsening. We've had zero-day threats for a very long time. We've had the linger rate is actually starting to drop a bit. Again, going back to the COVID, I think what we're going to have over the next 6 to 24 months is a riskier environment. The economy is going to take an impact off of this. There are undoubtedly going to be negative results of that. People are going to be laid off, have been laid off. We've seen jobless claims in the US rise to 2 million. When you have negative economic times, people will do things that they normally wouldn't do. They will engage in activities they normally wouldn't do in order to keep a roof over their head and feed their family. So that's going to increase the risk profile significantly.
And we've actually just had one more question come in. What would you suggest as a first step to make working from home more secure? That's from Chris.
Well, working from home is no different than working really from an internet cafe when you get down to it. If you've got a properly hardened laptop and a properly operating VPN and endpoint virus and endpoint firewalls that are set up correctly, then you should, for the most part, be safe. What introduces problems, as I talked about earlier, is people will start doing their own collaboration tools to fill a need to get their job done, and they're not intentionally trying to break security policy. They're simply trying to figure out a way to fix a problem that they see. And so they will introduce new applications into the environment that haven't been vetted, haven't been tested properly, and may introduce security issues, may introduce liability problems, or legal issues.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Richard. We've had a bumper selection of questions come in today, so it's clearly a subject that's resonating with those that are tuning in to view the webcast with us today. So thank you for those questions that have come in. Thank you also, Richard, to giving us your insights on those as well. Quite clearly, there's a lot of interlinked factors that need to be taken into consideration, and also heightening, arguably, the need for security or risk management right now, not least the external factors that we're currently all experiencing together. So definitely things that people need to take into consideration as part of a risk management process and strategy. So appreciate your insights for us on that as well, Richard. Just turning back to Kerry now to give us a bit of a wash up of today's news items for us.
Thank you. So Info Security magazine reports that MSC data center has closed following a suspected cyber attack. An investigation is still ongoing, although the company stated that malware could be the cause. Computer Weekly reports that Apple and Netflix are the most imitated brands in phishing attacks. And this is actually staggering. 1/10 of all brand phishing attempts in 2020 related to Apple, and 9% related to Netflix. And then finally, in Forbes, looks into the misconception around security and highlights that not understanding the inner workings of technology is no longer an option for executives.
Great, thanks, Kerry. And yeah, and I mean, just to highlight the point that you were making earlier, Richard, that there's lots of different factors that need to be taken into consideration, and the situation a lot of people are facing right now, particularly with the remote working. Some people are more attuned to it than others. Everyone's now in that situation. That Computer Weekly report probably underlines some of those things. I mean, Apple and Netflix are probably arguably some of the brands that are being used quite widely right now. So 1/10 of all phishing attempts on one of those brands, and almost 1/10 on the other. That's a worrying statistic, and as always, underlines the need for this kind of wariness of people looking at emails or clicking on links that they may not necessarily have solicited. So it does go to show that the usual advice remains there. Double check everything you're sent. If you're not sure about it, then don't open it. One of the easiest things to do is to look at the sender's address. That's one of the first clues as to whether it's come from a legitimate source or not. But if you're in any doubt whatsoever, don't click on any links that or open any attachments that are going to be there to not risk any malicious or phishing activities. So yeah, just another reminder of kind of keeping our eyes peeled. I think there as well. Forbes is interesting as well, actually. Our recent CISO stress report that we touched on last week is one of the things that is touched on around this understanding of the inner workings of technology, and it's something that CISOs or Chief Information Security Officers seem to be calling out for is a broader appreciation or broader awareness of the executives within their organisations around security, and also how they can better explain some of those investment requirements to those board members without going into the intricacies of some of the technology pieces as well. So interesting stuff in today's news. Thank you very much, Kerry. Thank you very much also for your time today, Richard. We're just about coming up for the end of the show today. So thanks once again, Richard, as our special guest today. Everyone here, front of house and behind the scenes at 0 Days Live, to all of you for tuning in. And don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be joined by another special guest, Michael Osterman, founder of Osterman Research. So please do join us then. Until then, please do have a good rest of the day from all of us here at 0 Days Live. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks.